talking about therapy is I think it's still like taboo there, right? Like, it's hard to talk about needing help to get your mind right.
Yeah.
And so how do we just break that ice and allow moms to know that it's okay to even just accept and acknowledge the need for therapy?
Yeah. Well, I think it's what we're doing here. One, spreading awareness, breaking stigmas, letting folks know that there are people in the community that they can identify with, that there are resources right there where they are. And if they're needing help getting connected, in maybe areas that aren't nearby or to appropriate levels of care, that it's here and it's readily available. There's affordable care out here. There's virtual care out here. There are things that are so convenient to meet every mama, every parent where they are.
Yeah. I think also too, like normalizing therapy, that it is not just for somebody who's really sick or really struggling, that it's helpful for everybody.
Yeah.
And so you're going through a huge transition in your life, a huge identity change. So whether or not you have, a diagnosis of postpartum depression or anxiety, you still would benefit from therapy and having a place to reflect and process, everything that's happening to you and to your family.
Yeah. How would a mom know that she's suffering or dealing with depression versus anxiety? Like, what's the difference between the two, Hannah?
Postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety can look very similar in some ways.
Okay.
But there are other ways that they're very different. And so with anxiety, you would have somebody who is constantly worrying. I hear a lot, like, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. Something bad is going to happen. And that can lead to a lot of like physical symptoms, like not sleeping well, nausea, upset stomach, that kind of thing. And a lot of just constant worry, maybe trying to control things, trying to control maybe baby's schedule or, what's going to happen in the day or something like that to try to ease that anxiety. And for postpartum depression, that is more like a sadness that doesn't go away, but also maybe not just sadness, but anger and irritability. And I think that's something that people may not fully understand either.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It doesn't always have to manifest as like sadness. I'm crying all the time. It can be I'm really, really upset and unhappy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agitated. Yeah. A lot of like the mom rage. It's interesting to me how, people don't know about like mom rage, but they'll say rage. Like that's the word that comes where I'm just like, I just have like rage. And yeah, that's a really common thing that moms express.
Try to think. I got mom rage. Okay, how would you describe it, Crystal?
Describe postpartum depression
versus anxiety.
Yeah, and so postpartum depression obviously marked by that low mood. Much like Hannah said, you do see sadness, those tearful spells. There might also be difficulties with concentrating or maintaining focus. Maybe one of the key things that we really want to make sure that we're jumping in and providing services for is if we're having those thoughts or urges of self-harm.
Yes.
Or thoughts of harm to baby or someone else in your life. And so that's a really huge indicator that something may be going on. With anxiety, I like to tell clients that it's sort of that overestimation of a threat, right? Like we're experiencing something in this moment that might be stressful, but if we were to ask someone else, how might they deal with it? They might say that I deal with it without this intense level of anxiousness or overwhelm. And so really being mindful that irrational thoughts, cognitive distortions, things like worst case scenarios, or things like, my baby didn't sleep last night, they're never going to sleep. So making these very generalized statements can obviously affect anxiety as well. So just being mindful of those signs and symptoms. I think another huge thing also is just making sure that we're aware that perinatal mood and anxiety disorders is an umbrella. And so postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety is a part of a cluster of disorders. So there are others as well. And so we really appreciate the fact that this awareness and education is here so that these signs and symptoms of a number of these disorders can be recognized because predominantly what we see is postpartum depression being diagnosed when there may be other things at play,
Got it.
like anxiety, PTSD, OCD, bipolar.
You know, my own personal experience with postpartum something, right? I had just given birth to, I think, Savannah, my youngest daughter. And I was at home and literally thought that I was about to die. Like my heart, I could hear it pounding. It slowed down. It felt like I was 50 beats an hour or something. And I was like trying to catch my breath. And I was in my bedroom and I told my husband at the time, like, I think something's wrong. You know, like I can't breathe. I can't catch my breath. My heart feels like it's going to stop. And I actually went to the emergency room.
Yeah.
I went to the emergency room. My mom came to watch the baby. He took me in. And that was a joke because they're like, okay, you got to sit there and wait.
Yeah.
But you guys, it was so scary because when I went back to the exam room or whatever, and they're looking at me like, what are you doing? What's wrong with you? You know, because nothing physically is wrong.